and your love and for the many opportunities that you give us to worship, to bow down, to lift up our hands, to rejoice, to experience your presence. Ooh, we worship you today. We give you glory and honor and praise because of who you are and because of how you have worked and moved in our lives and how you let your being be among us when we are so unworthy. For you are indeed a holy God. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, whose righteousness covers us that we might come before your presence. Oh Lord, we love you today. And we give ourselves to you anew. Thank you for the power and the glory of worship. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much, Brianna, for stepping in the gap and helping us to be able to worship God today. So, can someone do a little dim on the light up here so that it'll be a little clearer for us? Today, we are going to be talking about communication. And communication is something that all of us should always be working to improve on because of who we are and where we come from and how quickly we get involved in whatever the communicate is. And sometimes with that, we find ourselves a little bit frustrated and we get excited and we get annoyed and we get hurt and we get all kinds of things. And so today we're going to be talking about communication. We have approximately 32 minutes to get through this. So, communication. There are 5 levels. One is small talk. Anyone want to take a crack at what that is? Yeah, that's right, Chelsea. Chit chat. Yeah, very superficial. Just chit chat. Did you watch that game yesterday? Nothing more than that. Then there's factual communication or factual conversation. Anybody want to take a crack at what that is? You're just giving facts. You go back and you say, we came down the hill this morning and it was 51 degrees, but it felt like it was 31. Just the fact. Here's another fact. On Sabbath, Dr. Keith preached an awesome sermon. And if we leave it at that, it's just a factual communicate. Then there are ideas and opinions. Let's stick with the one on the Dr. Keith sermon. So with ideas and opinions, we can talk about how that sermon affected us. Oh, I thought it was amazing. I had been praying for quite some time that someone would be preaching about worship. And he finally did. And so afterwards, I shared a little something with him regarding that. And then we have feelings and emotions. I said, Dr. Keith, that stirred my spirit. And now I'm still kind of there in the stirring. I felt like the Greeks who came looking for Jesus, and afterward they said, didn't our hearts burn for hearing him? Then we have deep insight where we go beyond our feelings and our emotions and we start talking about things that are deep that God puts on our hearts and puts inside of us. So those are the 5 levels of communication. And all of us, yes, Steve, they are not in a specific order. It just depends on the person and how their communication skills have been developed and what they are trying to convey. And so there is no particular order of it. It just happens as it occurs. Then we have habits that can block communication. One of those habits that can block communication is the solution sender. So if Sarah and I were in a conversation and she started talking about something that troubled her, a solution sender would be one who pretty much gives orders. Girl, you know you need to. I think it would be good if you. They start telling you what to do. They have the solution. And there are people who think they have the solution for everything. Sometimes I can be one of those. They give out directions and commands. Get over here. Why don't you sit down? Take a break. That's the kind of communication they give. Then you have habits that block communication are put downs. How many of you have ever felt like someone was putting you down when they talk to you? Hands go up for that. A put down is when someone judges, they criticize, they cast blame. You're a snob. Oh, you are just so insensitive. You never think about anybody but yourself. Then there's the corrector. The corrector is the person that when you're talking with them, let's say you are communicating with them about an event that took place. And while you're talking to them, it was, you're saying it was about 5:00 in the morning. And then they said, no, it wasn't. It was actually 5:15. Well, what's the big deal with that, Steve? Yeah. Yes. Oh, the mic. Sorry.
Did you hear what I said? When I was younger, there was a lady that was my friend's mother. And if we didn't use correct English or proper English or whatever, she would stop us and correct us. And that would just, I don't know, is that the same as like that, I guess?
Yes. That is exactly what we're talking about. And then there are correctors who feel like they have, if let's say you call a person's name wrong and they make a correction on that, they know who you're talking about, but they still have the need to make a correction. So anytime you say something that's not exactly as it is, they jump in and they make the correction. And what does that do to the person who's trying to communicate? It causes you to stop and you don't want to say anything further. Then we have the judge. The judge is the person who tries to figure out what you're going to say next. They think they can mind read and they try to finish up your sentences. And oftentimes they are wrong. They're incorrect with what they're trying to convey on your behalf. And so, as opposed to letting a person speak for themselves, they jump in and try to tell you what it is you're trying to say. Another blocker in communication is the person who's a monologuer. Monologuers have the compulsion and the need to talk and talk and talk. You're supposed to be having a conversation, but it generally is just one person doing all the talking. And so when you have someone who is doing all the talking, the person who is supposed to be involved in the conversation with you, because a conversation involves two people. Am I right? Now, a lot of us like to talk to ourselves. I do it frequently. But when someone else is in the room, the object is to be able to talk to that person. And so when you're communicating, if there are two people who are communicating together, you have to give time for the other person to be able to communicate a part in the conversation as well. Does that make sense? And so sometimes when you're with a person who is a monologuer, they can go on and on and on, and the other person generally shuts down and says, no need for me to say anything because they have it all. And the final blocker for communication that I want to talk about is the silent treatment. How many of us like to do the silent treatment? Silent treatment, Dante, you say you do? Okay, hold on a second. Clayton, this is number 1. And Steve is going to pass the mic for us when we need it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
You may be quiet because the person is not, their concern is what they have to say. It is not a communication where it's a two-way street. So I become silent because they're not interested in the conversation. They're interested in themselves.
Right. So that goes back to which one? The one we just spoke about, the monologuer. So we have 5 levels of communication, and we have habits that can block communication. One of the things that is very important when it comes to communication is both people feeling confident that they are going to be respected in the communication, meaning that one person is not just going to, we like to say, hog the show, but they allow the other person to be able to speak during the communicate as well. And so when we go into an opportunity to communicate with someone, both individuals should be able to feel confident that they are in an environment where their voice can be heard as well. And so oftentimes people will get quiet. They don't feel confident, number one, but they also aren't sure that the person that they're going to be communicating with is going to respect what they have to say also. And so some folk just won't talk because they may have experienced times when talking or sharing what they felt was totally disregarded, or they felt like they were judged, or they had been put down by someone before. And so we have to get through all of those hurdles and try to make our communication, I like to use this word, but then again, there's so many things that have come up in society that really kind of makes me hesitant to say it. But because I'm with family, I'll just say it. We want people to feel like they're in a safe environment with us as individuals so that they can share what's on their heart to share. Does that make sense? Not feeling intimidated that they can't talk to certain people. But unless we go ahead and venture out and try it, we miss a lot of opportunities. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 says, there is a time to keep silent. Now, this goes back to where we talked about the monologuer. And then the monologuer is talking and talking and talking and talking, and the other person is quiet. But there are times when you want to keep silent. Ellen White has some things to say on that. In Ministry of Healing, she says, words spoken in reply to one who is angry sometimes serves only to exasperate the situation. But anger met with silence in tender forbearing, in a tender forbearing spirit quickly dies away. And what she's saying is that when someone is angry and they're talking to you, just let them talk. Be silent, because once you start talking back with them, it escalates over and over and over. This reminds me of a situation on my last ship. I was the command chaplain, and our supply officer, we were both on all of the boards because we were senior advisors to the captain of the ship. And the supply officer was Catholic, and I'm the chaplain who believes in following what the Word of God says, and that's it. And so I really believe that God called me into the military so that I could help people see that God loves them, although we're serving in the military. And I wanted the character of God to be reflected in my life. And so I took great care in making sure that all of the people on the ship had an experience with God in one way or another. And a part of that was our crew. We had over 3,000 individuals that were a part of our ship, the USS Bataan. And when I reported to the ship, I was in really good health. A month in the ship, or rather a month on the ship, the doctor told me, Brenda, your cholesterol is really high. We need to put you on medication. I said, Well, here's the truth, y'all. When I reported to that ship, 60% of the people on the ship had high cholesterol. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking something's wrong with that. The XO, the commanding officer, reported to the ship they did not have cholesterol issues. So my thought is something's wrong with what we're feeding our crew. And the truth was that the Navy had gone from our cooks cooking food to having processed food shipped to the ship, and all they had to do was heat it up. So I made a personal decision. For 1 month, I said, I'm not eating anything that comes out of the kitchen unless it's a fresh vegetable. That's it. And I'll do some fruit. And I had Carlos send everything else to me via mail that I needed on the ship. Within a month time, my cholesterol went back down to normal because I was also exercising every day. And so I said, we need to do something about what's happening with our people on the ship. Because once you get high cholesterol and you're not doing your exercises and you have to pass the physical fitness test twice a year, if you're not doing those things, you're going to be automatic. If you fail it twice, you're going to be automatically discharged from the Navy. And so I set out after much prayer, getting trained to do various types of physical fitness that would inspire the crew to get on board and to make some changes in their life. And the supply officer, who had more people in his department than anyone else, was furious. When I say furious, that's exactly what I mean. I will never forget the day, and I'm talking about silence here. I was in my stateroom. That's where I live. My room, my space was my office also. And I'm sitting at my office working, and Suppo, for short, supply officer, he walked past my office, and Sarah, you're me. And all of a sudden, he stops. Now, I didn't realize he had stopped until I started hearing, you blah, 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 blah. And he just went to town on me. And I sat there in silence. Now, we're sitting here, and people are walking down the P-way, the passageway. And as they walked, I'm Suppo and you're me. They would walk past and look at him, then look at me like, Chaplain, what's going on? And I just sat there in silence, didn't say anything. It was so bad that the executive officer and the commanding officer of the ship called me in and said, Brenda, why is Suppo having such a hard time? And I said, it's because I'm focusing on the crew and how we can help them experience, number one, God, but number two, how we can get their health back. And so I was disrupting his area. He said I had no business doing the things that I was doing. And I said, I stand to correct you. I'm here to ensure, number one, that our people experience God, but number two, to ensure that they are well taken care of. You can't expect the crew to work 12-hour shifts, get off, wash their clothes, press their clothes, do their studies for their qualifications, exercise, all of these other things that they need to do in 12 hours, and the day is gone, and then they have to get up and start it all over again. And so the commanding officer began to listen to the chaplain. And that made matters even worse. So the point is that when people are angry, it's not the time to talk to them because it's not going to do you any good. It's just going to escalate the situation. And so that's what Ellen White is referring to here. Husbands and wives may utter words that are liable to provoke a hasty reply, but let the one who is spoken to keep silent. Why? Because in silence there is safety. That's going to help the individual calm down. You know what we learned? One person can't argue. There needs to be two people. So I like to call it, you can fall into the trap, or you can maintain your composure and say, I'm not arguing today. Why don't we come up with a time when it would be good, when we can talk about it, as opposed to just go back and forth and nothing gets accomplished? I think, ooh, what happened? Okay. And then in counsel to children's guidance, she says, to be silent is the strongest rebuke that you can give to one who is speaking harsh, discourteous words to you. Keep perfectly silent. Often silence is eloquence. And that's what I believe I did with the supper. Dante.
It's kind of the words, two words I was thinking of. This it's kind of in there, and it kind of correlates with the words. It's two words. One is trust and confidentiality. I was trying that if somebody trusts you with their confidentiality, they trust you not to hear that again from somebody else, probably in upper leadership or something like that, or unless it's something detrimental to their health, like someone's going to do something suicidal, then you're supposed to do something about that. But other than that, trust is some other things too that you would break a confidentiality if it's going to be something of harm to the individual. But trust and confidentiality. But a lot of times you trust somebody and you confide them with confidentiality. Next thing you know, you're hearing it multiple times to different people that you didn't disclose that information to. So I know that would cause silence and a break in communication.
Yes. So that's a really good point. And thank you for bringing it up. As a Navy chaplain, we have confidentiality. As a minister of the gospel, you have confidentiality. And what that means is a person is putting confidence in you that you're going to keep their conversation just between you and them. In the world of clergy, there have been many confidences broken where parishioners don't want to talk to their pastors when they really should talk to their pastors. And the reason why is that they don't feel safe that their confidence is going to be kept. And so it is difficult when you've gone in and you've talked to your pastor and he's or she is in the pulpit preaching, and then your issue comes up and it is used in the sermon. And so oftentimes that puts a bad taste in people's mouths, and they don't want to, they cut off the possibility of going through that again. So I was saying that chaplains have confidentiality, that privilege. There was, I had gone to a suicide prevention conference. And when I got back and did the report on it, my 2-star general requested that I give an overview to all of the staff. And I did. And I included confidentiality, and I did it for a reason, that all of the staff needs to know that the chaplain has confidentiality privilege with all of the sailors and Marines and any other service members who are on the ship. He got furious, raised his voice and yelled at me in front of everyone. But I stood my ground. Afterwards, he apologized. So chaplains and counselors, well, it depends on the counselor's, the legal ramifications for the counselors. So with that situation, I've also been called to testify in court. And when I'm asked a question that tells exactly what the person says to me, I'm not doing it. And when I was threatened that I could be charged with contempt, I said, okay, I'm good with that. And so confidentiality is a big thing. And so if you're talking to each other, even when it comes to suicide, I have confidentiality and I have to own that. But what I learned in the Navy is that you can talk to a person who is really contemplating suicide. And when you let God lead you through it, he'll give you the right words where that person will submit and say, okay, yeah, you can take me to the hospital. And when I call the hospital and say I'm coming, this is Chaplain Bradley Davila, I'm coming down with someone, they know exactly why. And the reason is for that is because I would always go to the hospital to introduce myself whenever I went to a new command. They knew who I was and they'd know why I'm calling. So you set the stage to be able to do those things like that. Steve.
Yes, trust was mentioned earlier. And from where I'm at, I guess at this point, trust is something you develop. If I just meet you, I'm not going to open up. Some people do that, but I mean, I'm not going to do that. And trust to me is time. You know, you got to spend time with each other and develop some sort of relationship that way.
Yes.
That's just one thing. And then another thing I was thinking earlier, that it's an acronym. I don't know if I came up with it, but it's been years, and it's LTR: listen, think, and then react. And I haven't managed it yet. I'm still working on it, but we're all in the process, right? So, but that's something I try to keep, listen first. And then even if you have to take a minute or something, because people just, like myself, sometimes they just say something, and don't listen and then think about it, and then I'll know how to react, and so.
Thank you for saying that. You're absolutely right. But here's the key with trust. Trust is something that you have to decide you're going to do with an individual. And so I tend to walk into situations just trusting. And then I say, God, show me if I should not trust them. That's right. But that's just me. Okay, Clayton, we got something crazy going on. Okay. So, iMessages to effective listening and barriers that block effective listening. So, using iMessages is a great way to communicate. And what it does, Sarah, you're smiling.
I understand what you're saying.
She said, did you all hear that? iMessages.
Oh, it's just because iMessages is how you message people on an iPhone.
No, it is not. So with iMessages, when you're communicating, you talk about you as opposed to talking about the other person. So with an iMessage, let me see, I think I have a, with an iMessage, you're saying, let's suppose your husband opens all the doors up around the house, right? Oh, you left that door open. You pull the drawer and you left it open. You left the cabinet door open. You left out of the house and you left the house door wide open. We've done that a few times. Yes. Clayton is testifying to that. And so the other person who's living in the house, and it doesn't have to be a spouse, it could be a brother or a sister, because you walked into the door. You walk into the room and the light's off and the drawer that was out and you hit your shin bone. And so every time it happens, you get more frustrated, right? So there are two ways that this could happen. One could be, I could say, oh, you just make me so angry every time you leave these drawers out. You leave them out intentionally. How many times do I have to tell you about it? That's one way. Or I could say, all the drawers that are left open, all the cabinet doors that are left open, I get so frustrated. What was that? Because I am getting hurt all over. I I don't want to be angry, but I get really frustrated. And I'd like for us to be able to talk about this so that we can come up with a solution that will help us to get beyond this. So I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about what it does to me. And I need your help so that we can get beyond that. We have two other examples. Dinah has one, and Angela has one. She's giving me that look. Okay, Dinah.
You're so inconsiderate. All I do is slave for you, and you never think of anyone but yourself. Do is watch TV. You make me sick.
That was pretty good, Dinah. I don't know. Okay. Oh, Angela. Which one sounds better? The second one. Yeah. The second one sounds a lot better. Wife number 2 tells how she feels. She tells how she feels, a fact that the husband can't deny. I mean, because my feelings are my feelings, right? Angela's feelings are her feelings. And she voiced them. Now, if we don't voice how we feel, we kind of help to instigate an exasperation of a conversation. Dinah, on the other hand, she did not communicate how she felt. What did she do? She blamed you. And when we blame someone, what do? What do they tend to do? They get defensive and shut down. So, Steve, you can't hog the mic, brother. You got to pass it so other people,
Nobody else is
so we
saying
can
anything,
hear
so
other people.
I just have a question. It's like, is there ever a situation you think, or when no matter if you use iMessages, people still on you like that?
You know what? There are some people who were raised around arguments. There's some people who and this one, well, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, so I'll get to that one. So their way of communicating is arguing. And so that's a great communication topic to be able to talk about. I had a friend who everything was an argument. And I had to finally say, I can't do this. I don't like arguing. I grew up with brothers and sisters, with brothers and a sister who fought and argued all the time. My poor mother, I was calling her every day. And so I made a decision when I was growing. I can't be a part of that because it elevates me. In fact, I was at home and we were talking around the table. I don't know how the subject came up. I think it was with one of my sister-in-laws who was married. And they talked about all of this arguing. I said, look, y'all, I can't do it. I was traumatized as a child with all of the arguing that went on with my siblings. And so some people just have that in them because they've worked that habit. Yes, Kate.
Being silent, in regards to being silent when people are angry with you, I agree with that, except that there are some people function in patterns, and there are people who get out of control when they get angry, and if you let them do it to you once, they will do it again and again and again. You get up and walk away and say, I'll talk to you when you're under control. Otherwise, you are setting yourself up for constant abuse. And then also the silent treatment. There are people who like to punish other people with the silent treatment. They're angry, and so they're not going to talk to you for 4 days until they feel like you have met your punishment.
And you're absolutely right. And the other side to that is when you have a person who is like that, you can come back when they are not arguing and say, can we set up a time when we can talk about this? But it also means that you got to practice good communication skills in order for that to happen. And then there are going to be some times where you run into a person who's not going to be willing to submit to that. They're going to hold on to their habit of poor communication. And that goes back also, Kate, to what I was saying about having a safe place where you feel like you can communicate. Because God doesn't call us to be abused and to suffer through that. I don't believe that. Thank you for that. So barriers to effective listening: the bored listener, the selective listener, the defensive listener. That's one who, it doesn't matter what you say. In their mind, they have to defend themselves against what you're saying. So everything comes back to them. They see it only from one perspective. That's my perspective. So whatever you say, you are harping on me. You're accusing me. Then you have the interrupters, people in conversations, no matter who's talking, they jump in and they take it over. They interrupt you and you don't get to speak. It's all about them. And then you have the insensitive listener. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care what you're going through. All they care about is what they need to say so that you can hear it. So, how to listen effectively and rules for effective listening. Be alert to body language. And I'm rushing now because I need to stop. Right, Clayton? Use open doors where when people are talking, you're saying, yeah, I understand. Can you say more about that? It keeps the conversation flowing. Use active listening skills, where when a person says something, you say, okay, so what I hear you saying is. So you're showing that you're listening. And rules for effective listening. Let me go back to one thing with body language. When you're talking with someone, how do they know you are really listening to them?
I keep glancing at my phone.
He keeps glancing at his phone. Cell phones have been, yes. What were you going to say, Steve?
Oh, this is something a little different, like you saying. You hear you saying, so I hear you saying this.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work always, because I said, I hear you saying this, and then they're bringing their into. I said, no, this is what I said.
But it did work.
Well, I guess in a
Because,
way, yeah.
yeah, it did work
because they're trying to bring stuff into what I didn't. Say
you're an
that.
interrupter too, right?
You got it. Sure. I did that for the point.
Well, you did good. Yes, you're absolutely right. But it did work, because the goal of communication is to make sure that the other person understands what it is you're saying. That's the important thing. It's the important thing for you, and it's also the important thing for them. Okay. Sit attentively. Let them see. You're giving them good eye contact, and you're sitting attentively. You're listening to them. Now, that's not just for people who are in the area of counseling, right, Kate? That's for all of us. When our children are trying to talk to us and we're trying to multitask, now I'm guilty of this one, multitasking. And so I have to tell myself to stop, put everything else down, and just pay attention to that particular person, to your spouse, to your friend. They want to know that they're spending time talking with you and you're respecting the time that they have cut out in order to be able to talk with you. Act like you're interested. Some of us can raise our eyebrows, others of us can't, where they put one of them up and you can tell, right? See, you can tell that they're listening to you. And so you want them to know that they have your undivided attention. Use appropriate phrases like, tell me whether this is appropriate or not. You have lost your mind thinking like that. That's not appropriate. It's not going to help that person want to talk to you. You have got to be kidding. That's probably not going to help them want to talk to you. But phrases like, oh, John, I really understand what you're saying. Or, wow, that must really have bothered you. You're communicating back to them whatever their conversation is, and they can tell that you're listening, and they're also watching. Body language is very important. All right. Ask well-phrased questions. Can you say more about that? Because I want to make sure that I understand what you're talking about. Listen a little bit longer. So while you're listening, just listen a little bit longer. That's how you win people's trust. They know that you're making time for them. And I'm going to stop right. We've already talked about that. Okay, so tomorrow we'll take up with how to talk without fighting. This comes from a program that I was trained in when I was in the Navy. It's called PrEP, Prevention Relationship Enhancement Program. It works with spouses. It works with children and their parents. It works with co-workers. And it pretty much pulls everything that we've talked about this morning together. Okay, so we'll stop here, Clayton. I'm sorry I went over by 6 minutes. Thank you. Chelsea said I'm forgiven.